While we have our mulch materials out, it's time to get the soil ready for planting fall potatoes. Now, potatoes like a cool soil, and if you're planting them in July and August, it's hard to have a cool soil in Oklahoma without a little bit of preparation ahead of time. Now, our raised bed garden here, we're getting it loosened up, and then we'll be moistening it down and putting on some straw to insulate that soil for several days, get it cooled down before we put the potatoes in.
Cooling that soil is really important because you have to remember that and keep in mind that potatoes are basically a cool season crop, and that they respond better to cool soil temperatures, and that's why we plant potatoes here in Oklahoma in the spring, is because that is when the soil is cool. But you can fool them into thinking that it's spring just by trying to make this soil cooler. When soil is loose and well aerated like this, and the water moves through, drains well, and we get air movement through the soil, you're going to find that it's easier to cool the soil. So if you're thinking about planting fall potatoes in your garden, a soil that's well supplied with organic matter is going to do much better than a tight soil or a sandy soil.
Now, I know some gardeners who like to grow potatoes directly in mulch, and the problem with that is that it may stay even warmer than a regular soil would. So for your fall potatoes, it might be a good idea to plan to grow directly in soil, but keep it mulched heavily on top.
Now, Sue's doing something there that I sure like to do, and that's dig a little bit of a trench now where we're planning on planting potatoes in another week or so. This gives us room to allow some water to accumulate. We'll water the soil down well, just again to cool the soil temperature some now, but then also have it well supplied with moisture when we go ahead and plant these later on in the season. Fall potatoes in Oklahoma should go in sometime between 1st of August and August the 15th or August the 20th. If you get much past August the 20th, you're really getting a little bit late on them.
Now, you might find that seed potatoes are hard to find this time of year, and hopefully you saved some from your summer harvest. In a few weeks though, when we come back to plant this, we'll give you some ideas on how to possibly find some seed potatoes at your grocery store and fool them into sprouting, so you can go ahead and plant those if you can't find fall seed potatoes.
We're going to loosely cover this with straw now to hold the moisture in and continue to cool the soil. Then when we come in and plant our potatoes, we can rake the mulch back, plant the potatoes, and then just use this mulch at that time to cover them over again to help them keep cool while they germinate. About 2 weeks ago, we did some pre-planting soil preparation for our Irish potatoes here on Oklahoma Gardening. You'll recall we spaded the soil very deeply, wet it well, and then covered it over with a straw mulch. And this was an attempt to lower the soil temperature because we do want to have the soil cool in order to have success on germination and emergence and subsequent growth of the fall Irish potato. So today we're back planting the potatoes. I've prepared our planting sites about 6 to 8 inches deep. That's going to be a little bit deeper than we want to plant, but the reason I've done that is because I also want to give a light fertilization to the potatoes. And I'm going to come in and very lightly broadcast within the planting holes a complete fertilizer. You may use 10-20-10 or 12-24-12, but some good complete fertilizer in the planting hole, and then mix that in well with the soil. This allows the fertilizer to be released then below the potato seed piece as they begin to germinate and their roots begin to form, but yet avoids initial intimate contact of the soil, the fertilizer, and the potato all at the same time, so that you may get some burning on that potato if there's too much of a concentration of fertilizer right by that potato seed piece. After we've had the soil and the fertilizer mixed well, then of course it's time to plant the potato seed pieces. And Sue's going to give you some tips on planting and variety choices for fall Irish potatoes while I finish preparing these planting sites.
Of course, if you're going to plant Irish potatoes in the fall in Oklahoma, you want to use the same varieties basically that you would for spring. Oklahoma recommended varieties such as Irish Cobbler, Kennebec, Red Lesotho, and Red Pontiac. There are some others that we planted in our spring garden as a trial, and we've saved them over the summer and kept them at 40 degrees and high humidity in the refrigerator so that they're ready to use for seed pieces now. Now, if you're having a hard time finding seed potatoes for use in the fall, let me give you a few tips on that. The local garden centers may just carry limited selections or may not have any available. And you may have some that you have kept over in your own home just in storage for use as food. Well, those will be a little harder to get sprouted and get going than if you had stored them at cool temperatures. And so you may want to use a larger piece. You may want to ask your neighbors if they possibly stored some and saved them over. We don't recommend going to the grocery store and buying seed potatoes off of the produce department, because those have been treated with a substance called maleic hydrazide that prevents sprouting, and they won't perform properly in your garden. Well, with seed potato preparation, there are several ways you can go about that. With fall seed potatoes, keep in mind that we have a shorter season, we're going to have cooler temperatures. The plants will not grow as large as they would in a spring crop. And so it's a good idea to start with a fairly large seed piece to get the plants off to as good a start as possible. Now, I cut these up a few days ago, kept them in this pan, and covered that with clear plastic wrap so that they would suberize or heal over, because we're planting into cool, moist soil and we don't want those to rot in the soil. The two varieties I'm putting in, this one is Sanger, and it's a new release from Canada. It gave us a nice harvest in the spring garden. The other potato I'm putting in is called Warba, and it's a white potato with pink eyes. Now, these are spaced in a staggered formation in a raised bed garden so we can fit as much in this space as possible. Ray's going to come back and cover those in, but first I want to give you some tips on if you're running short of time and want to cut up some seed potatoes and plant them right away. There's a way to go about that. Now, this variety is Viking Purple. The regular Viking variety is a good keeping potato. It's one that's recommended for growing in Oklahoma. This purple selection is one that we tried this spring, and it did nicely for us. Most of your seed pieces need to be about the size of a hen's egg if you're going to plant them for fall. These two right here are a little too small. These are right about the same size, and if you wanted to cut them, only cut them in half so you'll still have plenty of flesh in there to produce a plant. Now, if you don't have time for them to suberize over, what you can do is take about a tablespoon of dusting sulfur. It's the same sulfur we use for fungicide in the garden. Put those in a paper sack and just shake them up. And that will coat them adequately and protect them in the soil. Now, over here, Ray's getting ready to fill these back in.
We're covering these about 4 inches deep, but then I'm also going to mound the soil a little bit over them, because the soil in itself is going to give some insulation to these potatoes and help keep them cool, at least until they get germinated and begin to grow. And that's the real critical time for fall Irish potatoes, is getting those seed pieces growing before they rot in the ground. And of course, the critical factor on that is to try to keep them as cool as possible. Once we have gotten through that initial stage of germination and initial growth, then it's not quite as important that you keep them as the soil is cool, but nonetheless, they're going to grow faster, more uniformly, and produce a more quality potato if you do keep the soil cool and keep it well supplied with moisture. Another thing that we want to do as soon as they're covered with soil is to replace the mulch that was on them earlier. And if we are careful to place the mulch loosely over those potatoes so that there can be some air circulation, but yet still shade the soil and retain the moisture, the success is going to be much greater. About 3 to 4 or 5 inches of a good clean straw or hay mulch is usually adequate for the fall planting of potatoes. Within a few days, we'll start checking these potatoes by pulling our mulch back and looking in, and if we start seeing some growth or emergence of the potatoes, then the mulch can be pulled back so that there can be some light and some air circulating around those little germinating potato seed pieces to go ahead and continue growing. I believe that Sue has some more tips that she wanted to share with you on what could be expected of planting a fall potato such as this in your garden.
One last point we really want to emphasize is that your crop will be smaller. The potatoes themselves will probably be a little bit smaller, but you'll have a better opportunity to keep those through the winter than you would a summer crop. Usually in the summertime, we're hard pressed to find a place that's 40 degrees and high humidity other than our little refrigerator crisper box, and you can only store so many there. But with fall potatoes, you can always put them in a root cellar or make some sort of underground storage, or some people leave them in the soil until they need them.
Right.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.